It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday. And let me move my phone another shot in case it rings and accidentally doxes someone with call display. Okay, it's Feedback Friday, and a lot of comments to whip through this week. We're going to focus on Wednesday's video first, Monday's video second, because there were more long-form answers to Monday's video. So I'm going to try to blow through as many comments as I can off the top for Wednesday's video, move on to Monday's video. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can't afford it. We need one more session to make goal for the week. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Okay, so I'm tired. Full disclosure, you can see it in my eyes. Okay, here we go. Wednesday's video about, simple versus easy. I think another way to frame making a choice now versus later is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. By this, I mean failing to make a decision and act on it because it's not a perfect plan or action, even though doing anything would leave you better off than you are now. And yeah, that's really valid. The issue is that psychologically, a lot of people have a lot of self-blame. So if you don't make a decision, it's not your fault, even though the outcomes are worse. And that's something that does, it takes some cognitive behavioral adjustments to overcome. But, advice is sound, fair. Second comment. It's interesting that simple but hard would be your second pick, as I think I would prefer complex but easy. That may be why I will purposely save some easy trophies for last, because once I get the hard stuff out of the way, I don't mind grinding on a mini game or something for those last few trophies. And yeah, there's no wrong answers. Part of this is, what the Myers-Briggs personality typology, it's the J versus the P. Some people like to keep options open. Other people like me are, see what's out there. Other people like me are like, nope, decision. Any decision is better than no decision. There's no wrong answers as long as you're aware of the weakness or the shadow involved in your preferred way of decision making. As long as the way you tackle something is benefiting you, go for it. And that's why I like talking about this stuff, because some people will be like, no, that doesn't sound right for me. This works better. Other people will go, yeah, I might try that. Everybody's different. There's no one size fits all solution for this stuff, which is what makes doing mental health content on the internet so challenging. There are a lot of misunderstandings. And speaking of that, somebody said that I started this video from a false premise, and which is quite rare for you, Leanna. They said, just as a style point, I really didn't appreciate that. It comes across as condescending. I know it was intended to be complimentary, but this is not, not necessary. Like, just hit me with it. For me, I prefer that better. The damning with faint praise just doesn't work, since this commenter tends to be rather negative on everything I do anyway, or at least comes across as negative. But the person claimed that I said that the nomination leading to presidential candidates is simple. And interestingly, they said the nomination leading to a presidential candidate has never been simple, not just in the USA, but in every representative Democratic government ever attempted. Okay, that's a false premise too, because a lot of representative Democratic governments don't have a president. We have a prime minister. Right. If you're going to accuse me of starting on a false premise, don't commit a false premise yourself. But I never said that. And so I don't know where the misunderstanding is. That wasn't the point of simple but easy. It was about how simple versus easy. It's about the individual decisions that people make and how to talk to other people about about politics. So if I accidentally gave the impression that I said nominating a president was easy or a candidate, No, not my intent. But no, not but. And you know, the science shows that the average person makes an emotional choice and then backfills with logic, as opposed to truly laying out the pros and cons and making a logical choice. So as much as the American system has a lot of complications, those complications were designed to slow down knee-jerk decision-making, to slow down emotional reactions. That's what that system is designed to do. And a big problem with American politics right now is people don't understand that's a feature, not a bug. And while I think that the nominating process in a lot of places is woefully out of date and inefficient, I'm not claiming that that's not intentional. The problem with that inefficiency is it does benefit people who have familial or institutional access to the halls of power, and disadvantages people who don't. And this goes as much for, white families in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. I only went for that one because I'm a Kentucky colonel, so I'm aware of a lot of the issues in those areas. But other parts of the country, flyover country, those places that aren't power bases in the country. So, and even in Canada, there are, I talked about the fact that I'm in a conservative riding, so I vote just to vote because you never know, right? Demographic shifts happen. And if I show up and I vote, I can control what I can control. Everyone who's not a conservative is preparing to lose the next Canadian election. And people like me are really grappling with the fact that I'll personally be fine, but a lot of people won't be. And, some of the inflation now that Trudeau is getting blamed for is directly because Harper, the conservative prime minister before Trudeau, dismantled the wheat board and tied the cost of Canadian wheat to global prices. There was a bread price fixing scheme that broke in the news, but other things would not be as expensive now had that not happened. And everything is pushed as a positive thing, as a pro thing, pro farmers. Farmers are going to make more money. And yeah, farmers got to get paid more. But we have to control the rate of increase. And that's the problem with mass deregulation, is it may make things slightly better in the short term, but it leaves us prone to more shocks. This stuff is complicated. But when it comes to decision making based on complicated issues, that's why first principles reasoning is so important. And when it comes to this stuff, you'll realize if you really listen to people, a lot of the things they say are actually quite emotional and don't make any logical sense. And that's okay. You're not going to get through to them by shaming them for having an emotional reaction. An emotional reaction is valid. Most people vote just based on whether they like a presidential candidate or they don't like a presidential candidate. And guess what? Because the president doesn't make law, that's Congress and the Senate. They just sign the law or veto the law. You need somebody with good judgment and good character more than you need somebody who's policies you agree with, because the policies they're going to be able to enact depend very, very strongly on whether or not they get enough of a majority to pass their agenda. That's pretty simple. Okay, so this goes on to, somebody says, a lifelong Democrat, I agree with you. The party tends to overcompensate everything to the point of paralysis. I don't know if that was overcomplicate or overcompensate. The word is overcompensate. I have always found a clear demarcation between the two parties, but after the Biden debacle, I'm more than disillusioned with the inner workings of the party leadership. If people want to hear some of my thoughts on that, listen to the episode of It's Not Therapy on ageism. I'll link to it in the description box. The guest and I got into why we agree that it was not, well, from a human perspective, it wasn't handled well. But everybody's got to live with what they did. So I think that I'm sure it's going to sting Biden for a while, just because it was so, they humiliated the guy. And as you saw on Monday night, if you watched the speech, dude was totally with it. I really think it was more about Harris's polling and less about Biden's ability to do the job. And you know what? If that was presented honestly, that's valid. But politics is not fair. And one of the hardest things to do as a human psychologically is deal with the fact that some things just aren't fair. It's a lifelong struggle. I think Biden's legacy will be very, very good. But yeah, I feel for him as a human being right now. And it continued, right? I was really disappointed. Well, I was impressed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she made her speech at the DNC. It's like, oh, wow, she's learning. She's maturing. And then she shanked the party in the back on Gaza last night. And I don't respect that. If you're going to go and play nice because now you are in the halls of power and you understand that you have to make friends, I support that. When you're trying to have it both ways, still be cool with the street, but also get a speaking spot at the DLC. Oh God, you see where my brain's at. But you can't have it both ways. Because if you try, you prove that nobody can trust you. And this has always been my issue with AOC. She really has to decide whether she wants to be I'm careful with the word radical, but, radical, like cool with the kids, how do you do fellow kids type of congressperson who's not going to rise above that. Because in order to be a senator, you have to appeal to a broader range of people in New York than her congressional district. So she's either going to stay there, and some people do very, very well as lifer Congress people. There's nothing wrong with that. But she seems to have higher ambitions. And if she's going to have higher ambitions, she's got to keep her word. She's got to follow through instead of trying to have it both ways. That's my thoughts about that. Hot take. Another person said, I've been long baffled by the whole Republicans are better for the economy myth. This has been meticulously tracked since the 1940s, and unemployment, federal debt deficit have all gone up under almost every GOP president since then. And they give a bunch of other statistics. I don't know if numbers are just more difficult for people to grasp, but I've never understood why all this isn't simply waved in front of people every time they are resold the fiscally conservative line. On numbers alone, it's not complicated. As a fiscal conservative, always vote Democrat. And I'm recording this before Kamala Harris's speech, so nothing about DNC Night 4 is going to be in this video. But Bill Clinton, and he's always had this skill, Bill Clinton, broke it down beautifully in his speech on night 3. And I was really surprised that what he said survived the fact checking as well as it did, because he gave this statistic that since the end of the Cold War in 1989, 51 million new jobs were created in America. 50 of those were created under Democrat presidents. 1 million were created under Republican presidents. The numbers are actually more like slightly shy of 50 million for Democrats, 1.5 million for Republicans, but still, that really hammers it home, right? And there are nuances. There have been more Democratic presidents than Republican presidents since the end of the Cold War, because that was Bush 1, right? Then there was, I forget the numbers, 43 or something like that, because then it was Clinton, and then it was W, so he went 2 terms, and then it was Obama, and then it was Trump 1 term, and then it was Biden. So there's been more time, and Clinton was president over a huge bull market. But, and then there's the complexity of Clinton had divided government, Obama had divided government. So it's not just the Democrats responsible for those job creations, but the statistic that Clinton said was technically true and very easy to understand, right? Simple and easy. That's what Clinton's good at. And is it more complicated? Yes. But in terms of not necessarily saying Democrats are perfect on economic policy, but putting the lie to the idea that Republican presidents are better at economics, because GDP and the stock market and all that stuff, that is not something that affects the average person as much as job creation. So Bill Clinton's skill with oratory is that he's real good at breaking that shit down for people. Whatever other personal failings he may have, everybody has them. He's real good at that shit. And he wrote that himself. Apparently, he saw night 1, tore up his speech, wrote it all himself, went off teleprompter for the last 15 minutes of his speech. You could tell he went way long. But he has this gift for getting people to listen. And whatever you think about the guy personally, he's effective. So if that helps, again, if you keep it simple and as long as it's factual, people will understand it. I learned this doing charity fundraising. It was I was working with Epilepsy Toronto, and they wanted to push a 1 in 100 stat. 1 in 100 people have some sort of seizure condition like epilepsy. And they thought because it was so common, that was going to be really powerful. It fell flat because there's no face on that. The simplest thing you can do, which is what other charities like Easter Seals do really well, or like World Vision, the Feed the Children stuff, they put a kid in front of people and they give them something with a face and a story to connect to emotionally. People will give money for an individual child in a way, or adult, in a way they won't give to a statistic. That makes sense, right? Most people just math hard, right? Math is not hard. Math is not hard. Math just requires concentration. And, my high school math teacher, wherever he is right now, is like, my ears are ringing. My message has been felt. Bless Jeff Schifrin. But yeah. So moving on to Monday's video, which went over better than I thought it would. Which is interesting. We're going to do more on this topic because I do think we do need a dialogue. that was on why single sex spaces don't work. And this is something I do feel really, really strongly about. I don't think they benefit women. I don't think they benefit men. They're a band-aid, but more on that. First person said, if you're so afraid to be talked about when you go to the bathroom, you are not safer because someone else is being talked about. You are still in an adverse relationship with those people talking about you. You are correct. You are absolutely correct. And that's why most women know female-only spaces, well, woman-only spaces, are not safe. Actually, I think that women-only spaces that are trans and non-binary inclusive are actually safer than the, cisgender female spaces because there are fewer assumptions made. But that is not a guarantee. I really believe that the more homogenous a group appears to be, the more bad habits go unchecked. And again, I am not saying people can't have single-sex spaces for comfort temporarily, because people have aversions that they can't control. I do think that in terms of understanding and actually solving the root problems, single-sex spaces add to the problem. Just having conversations with men among men and just having conversations about women among women don't create better understanding with the other side of that equation. Period. End of story. We're not solving the domestic violence problem. We are not solving the violence problem. We're just not. The statistics show it. They're going up for men and they're not budging for women. So, you're right. You're right. A lot of female group dynamics are very, very adversarial. There are entire books written about that, which is why I don't get why so many men think being a girl is just sunshine and roses and people giving you shit. It's not. A woman said, basically, a commenter said what I just said. You could not be more right than you are with this one. Female-only spaces tend to be cesspools of aggression. So if you won't take it from me, take it from this commenter, okay? Another commenter. So instead of finding root problems, the intention is to essentially slap a band-aid on an infected wound. Is that a good analogy? Yeah, it is. But this reminds me of a comic piece I saw earlier on Facebook. A woman is in an arcade on one of the machines and a kid is playing on the machine next to her. The kid's mother yells at the kid and starts beating him before dragging the kid away, saying how video games make a person violent, when it's violence in the real world making people violent. As a kid, I was never good at roughhousing, and my older brother tended to be way too rough with it. Yeah, I do. I think we greatly underestimate just how much violence or observed violence children, especially boys, are exposed to before age of majority, before even the age of 12. And that is affecting, and not just that, but the messages they received. I mean, I was socialized more male. My dad wanted a boy. And so I was always told, if someone hits you, you hit them back. And all that did was got me beat up and in trouble. And that was before zero tolerance violence policies came into schools. I don't think zero tolerance violence policies work. I think that it actually enables bullies because the school punishes who they see, not who started it, which, penalizes people defending themselves. Another thing I feel really strongly about. And this is the one I left to the end because it's a longer answer. The more I hear about complex ideas and situations, the more I realize nobody is on the same page. Everything is complicated and in need of self-control. Control what you can control. Getting down to business. What does that feel like? It looks heartless, but I don't know what it's supposed to be anymore. That's why I'm here, to learn about it. Okay, I'm going to focus on what control what you can control means, because it is a central premise of a lot of trauma therapy. but also therapy for depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff. It is a very simple concept to say, control what you can control. It is not easy to make the changes to do that when you grew up as a people pleaser because you had abusive adults, usually, but it could be a sibling as well, or school peers who expected you to read their minds or else. And it involves realizing that trying to anticipate needs and trying to make everybody happy is not just being nice for the sake of being nice. It is trying to manipulate and control other people so you stay safe. That's part one. Part two is realizing it didn't keep you safe. It just keeps you in a constant state of hypervigilance and fear. People are going to not like you if you try to do anything remotely public. I mean, look at what's happening with Gus Walz, Tim Walz's kid. That kid is adorable. Now, apparently he has ADHD, autism, and some other developmental nonverbal. So I guess he was late talking. But I saw it live. And the reason I watch these things live is not because I terribly love these things. It's because I want to see the original context. So when the internet tries to warp it, I'm like, no, here's what actually happened. That kid, he's 17 years old. He was so happy he was crying. He was yelling, "That's my dad," so loud that it picked up on the TV microphones. It was just joy. He was so cute. And GOP operatives like Ann Coulter decided to pick on him. And yeah, Democrats picked on Kyle Rittenhouse when he cried in court. Slightly different context, right? Right. One was trying to beat a murder charge, which he did. Another was just being so happy that people liked his dad. And if people could have simpler priorities like Gus Walz and not be afraid to be so happy you cry in public. I mean, Joe Biden did too when his daughter introduced him. It was more subtle, but, you know, Joe Biden's much older than Gus Walz. Gus Walz is not an adult yet. He's 17 years old. But he still did. And it was sincere and it was emotional. And the Walzes are clearly a very loving family. I mean, Gus was up there hugging everybody on the stage at the end of the night. Once the hugging started, Gus was unstoppable. He was just, you're getting a hug and you get a hug. He out-Oprah'd Oprah that way that night. But you saw people go like, oh, surprised by the enthusiasm of the hug. But if you're gonna overdo something, that's a cool thing to overdo. Exuberance, right? So, and I really, really respect the Walz family for letting him be him, knowing there would be criticism, confident that they can, you know, protect and counsel their kid through it instead of wanting to keep him out of the public eye the way they did with Barron Trump. Because Barron Trump didn't cry. We barely saw Barron Trump. And every time we see him, he looks like, you know, snipers, sighting him. But no, that's not literal. That was a metaphor for the look on his face. But the fact that the Walzes are proud enough of their son and wanting to normalize neurodivergent behavior. And I love that because I think that we need to normalize and center neurodivergent behavior because while it is an intense extra social challenge, it is not a disease. It is more that the world isn't built for autistic people and people with ADHD. And that doesn't mean it's not challenging. And, it's called a disorder because it negatively impacts people's lives. And some of it is so severe that, yes, medication interventions are life-changing. Being on the right meds is incredibly important. But how, what we consider a disability and what we consider just, get glasses. I mean, I'm visually impaired, right? Screen's kind of blurry looking at y'all right now. These are things to correct a disability. Insulin, heart medication, thyroid medication. But people don't identify as being disabled because they wear glasses. It's because you get glasses, you can do everything, somebody with naturally perfect vision can do. The disability is the inability to do things. And I do think that we can make neurodivergencies less of a disorder if we center the needs of people with ADHD and autism more. I feel really, really strongly about that. And that is part of my theory of why we're so stuck on so many of these men's issues. And I may unpack this on Monday, but obviously in gaming, anything online, there's a lot of autism. And I get in trouble every time I say this, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's true. And autistic people are not privileged. So you go up to an autistic person who has been taught by ABA therapy that was too aggressive, that every lousy social situation is their fault because they're autistic. Every time something doesn't go well, it's their fault because they're autistic. You go up to a guy like that and say, you're a white straight cisgender male, so you're privileged. They're going to want to tell you to go fuck yourself because it's not true. There is no privilege in being blamed for every time a social situation goes wrong. And guess what? It is not always the autistic person's fault. Some holistic people are assholes. But people with, autistic people are just conditioned to believe, well, I did something wrong because that person is angry at me. Not necessarily. And if you did, that person is perfectly capable of telling you what the issue was so you understand. And most people just get well, this wasn't my preference, or it's inappropriate. Okay, great. You're telling somebody who doesn't understand appropriate the way an holistic person will that something's not appropriate. You might as well start going to a fish. Why can't you breathe? Right? It's not fair. It's not fair. And this is where control what you can control comes in. As long as you are making your best efforts to be a good listener and give other people space to talk and learn how to apologize properly and, become emotionally connected to your own inner workings as well as others, so it's easier to understand. It's easier to relate. Autistic people are always going to have more trouble with that than others. But one thing I know about autistic people is when they understand that they've hurt your feelings, they do care. They're beside themselves a lot of the time because that was not their intent. So if somebody's saying, I can't help it, I have ADHD, or I can't help it, I'm autistic, not an excuse. But it's also not an excuse to beat up on someone with vagaries because they're neurodivergent. And all you can control is to give it your best and be open to learning. And sometimes a bad social interaction is no one's fault. I think we really do personalize arguments or somebody having a bad day or something like that too much. And part of it is you get blocked and now you lose access to that person forever. And it's unfortunate that that's the only tool we have. But sometimes it is because a person just won't listen. And often they don't listen because they won't stop talking. But that's a story for another day. The point is, control what you can control is an essential principle to avoid excessive self-blame and have true accountability, meaning giving yourself credit for what you did right, as well as taking responsibility for the things you did wrong, and not blaming yourself for the other person or people's part of an exchange. Just because you are autistic or a man or whatever, it is not automatically your fault. All those models were designed to do initially is make people aware of the differences and who is centered in society. And that neurodivergent part of the Venn diagram gets left out of discussions of privilege all the time, alongside invisible disabilities. And it's wrong. It's wrong. So it's very important to focus on control what you can control so that when somebody is wrong, you don't blame yourself. And it's an ongoing struggle. You constantly have to do the work because it's hard. People blame me for shit that, God, I've got people ganging up on me right now because a guy left the Discord server. We didn't throw him out. He left because he didn't want to stop making sexual comments about tomboys and calling women MILFs. And that was my fault somehow. I'm Satan because of that. I can't control it. And he has the right to speak. Right? And that's the thing. You can be a real bully if you try to control things like that. Because, unfortunately, First Amendment controls the whole internet. He has a right to lie. I can't do anything about it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session. We need one more this week. One more. Coffee.com/Leanna K. For someone who can't afford it. Thanks for watching. And I don't have the thing up. Bad me. I gotta delete some of these old setups for OBS. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a great weekend.